Welcome to Be Well. Thanks for joining us today. It's my pleasure to be able to host Be Well with you. Today's topic is San Diego Pride's impact, and I'm very excited to have with us the executive director, Fernando Z. Lopez Jr., the executive director joining us today. Fernando, thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Fernando Lopez. I'm the executive director of San Diego Pride. I just had my 10-year anniversary a few weeks ago. I use they, them, their pronouns.
Well, I really appreciate you being with us today. I know it is a busy time in your office, and I give you an opportunity to speak to that. But it's really, I am just very grateful to have these opportunities to bring leaders in their field to be able to come to us and talk to us as a community about the impact that they're making in living a mindful, vibrant, fulfilling life. So San Diego Pride, if you would, to start us off, Fernando, share a little bit how it got founded and truly what the mission of San Diego Pride is.
Sure, I would love to. And I just want to say thank you so much for even taking the time to host us today. The YMCA has been incredible partners with us, especially for LGBTQ youth. So always a pleasure to work with YMCA.
Thank you.
So San Diego Pride, as many folks might know, the Pride movement specifically started as a result of the Stonewall riots, which were sparked by state-sanctioned police violence and ongoing raids at the bars in the LGBT community. At the time, it was illegal, technically, to be gay, or homosexual acts were considered illegal. It was also illegal to serve alcohol to anyone that was a homosexual. So it was actually it was illegal to serve alcohol to gay people. And so the police would raid the bars, folks fought back. And while these raids had happened for decades, what was different this time is the LGBT community held off law enforcement for 3 days. And LGBT activists at the time said this was such an important moment that we wanted to commemorate that. And so 1 year later, there was held the Christopher Street Liberation Day March. And those marches happened all across the country. And while San Diego didn't have a march in 1970, what did happen was a protest in front of the police headquarters and what was called a gay-in, where folks got together to find community and gather and just, connect with one another. So those events in San Diego shifted year over year. There was other gay-ins in 71. In 72, we actually held a conference instead of a march to strategize around LGBT rights. There was an ad hoc march in 74, and in 75, we got our very first permit. So our organization specifically started in 1989 after a bunch of different ad hoc organizations had been around. And there was a vision from our very first LGBT elected official, or who would become our first elected official, Christine Kehoe. And she had a vision of what if we could have a Pride organization that was a nonprofit, that we would be profitable in a way that those excess proceeds would be invested back into the community to do that work. So we became our own nonprofit, finally solidified in 94. And since 1994, San Diego Pride has become the most philanthropic pride in the world. We have given out more than $3 million to LGBT serving organizations locally, nationally, and globally. So that's sort of the short version of that very long history.
Well, that's fantastic. That's quite an evolution over 25 plus years and having tremendous impact beyond just our local community. And we're going to talk about the Pride events in just a moment. But Fernando, if you will, what truly is the mission today? And you spoke to and alluded to programs and services.
Yeah, so San Diego Pride's mission is fostering pride, equality, and respect for all lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities locally, nationally, and globally. And our vision statement is a world free of prejudice and bias. And I think what's interesting about our vision statement is that it doesn't say a world free of prejudice and bias for just the LGBT community. It says a world free of prejudice and bias, which so much of the work that we do is intersectional. And so really what San Diego Pride has become is a year-round education and advocacy organization that, again, invests in our community. So we have programs for our youth. LGBTQ youth are probably one of the strongest strongest programs that we have. After school mentorship programs, leadership development programs. We do a ton of advocacy in the school, including reforming school district policy that impacted 140,000 folks. In fact, our county superintendent just this month announced that they're adopting our platform for all school districts in San Diego County. So it's an exciting progress there. We have art programs and music programs for youth and adults. We have women's programs. We have programs for the Latinx community. We're founders of the Black Coalition, the API Coalition. We have veterans programs. I mean, I could go on and on. We have international programs. We're actually founders of the International Pride Association called InterPride. It was founded by San Diego Pride board member Doug Moore in 1981. We're hopefully going to be hosting that international conference here for the 40th anniversary of the first conference in 2023. So I really could go on and on about all of those different voter engagement programs, education programs, advocacy programs, grant programs. I encourage folks to go to our website, sdpride.org/programs to learn all about those. And I will say we have a very small staff. We're only about 11 people at the moment. We're hopefully going to hire a little more, but we're able to do that work because we are a volunteer-led organization. So there are about 200 local San Diegans who give their time week after week, month after month, year after year to invest in serving their community. Our youngest volunteer is probably in junior high, and our oldest volunteer is around 85 years old. So there's a lot of intergenerational mentorship that happens here too. It's just really just an honor to be a part of this organization.
Well, Fernando, I'm in awe of the depth and breadth of all the programs and services and the engagement that you have across our community. So I appreciate you sharing it. How did we become so fortunate to have you here? How did you come to the position here in San Diego?
You know, so I maybe not the fun part of the story, but I'm from the Imperial Valley. I think a lot of folks might know where El Centro is. And it's a very homophobic town. It was the county that voted most in favor of Proposition 8, for folks who remember Prop 8. I'm a first generation US citizen, Mexican American, product of Jewish and Mexican immigrants. While my parents were very prepared for the discrimination that I would face with the life that existed at that intersection, they were not prepared to have a queer kid. And so when I came out, I found myself homeless at the age of 15. So I struggled through school, graduated top of my class, lived in my car for quite a long period of time, and came to San Diego where I heard that there were gay people. Thankfully, I was taken in by a very kind community activist, and I went to my very first Spirit of Stonewall rally at San Diego Pride in the year 2000. I haven't missed one since. I was so inspired, and over time, I ended up volunteering for LGBT serving organizations at a time when there really wasn't a lot of support there. I ended up being the regional director for Marriage Equality USA. They sort of just asked me to be a part of that work. And then I ended up working for Equality California, worked with the Victory Fund. I actually worked in the Prop 8 campaign. And so over time, I did a lot of LGBT advocacy and lobbying work for the rights and protections that we have now in the state of California. 10 years ago, we had our first Black gay executive director, Dwayne Crenshaw, and he literally just picked up the phone one day and said, "Hey, will you come work for Pride? I want to turn us into an education and advocacy organization. I know that's the work that you do." He convinced me and brought me here 10 years ago.
Wow, that's fantastic. I'm going to shift a little bit our conversation and look at where we are today. I'm aware that the pandemic has been particularly challenging for our LGBTQ community. And so if you could maybe touch on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right, that there's, I think, a stereotype of folks in the LGBT community that we're affluent, there's like double income, no kids, that stereotype that I think we're still trying to break down. And the reality is that LGBTQ folks of all ages have been severed from their networks of support through family, through institutions of faith, through their faculty at school. And so oftentimes end up having lower educational outputs or outcomes, which can impact them throughout their careers. So the LGBT community is actually an underemployed community. And so throughout the pandemic, we saw ourselves losing our jobs, feeling even our further isolation from our friends and our family who maybe we already felt isolated from. So it was really re-traumatizing for a lot of folks. And so what we've seen is a disproportionate impact on the LGBT community in the wake of during and in the wake of COVID-19. And in a lot of ways, it's what our organization is there to do, is to make sure that folks feel connected and can find community even in spaces like this. And other wonderful organizations like the LGBT Community Center are there for crisis intervention and mental health services.
Wow. So let's talk about this year. I know last year Pride events look very different. This year it'll probably be an evolution of some of where we were this last year and into our current status. So share with us, if you will, what Pride events look like this year.
Yeah, last year, I never thought I'd run a TV studio. We produced so much virtual content last year, which was very engaging. We actually ended up reaching almost 1 million people with our virtual online content and educational content. And that was just amazing.
Fantastic.
This year, we are sticking to some of that virtual content. We understand that some folks still don't feel comfortable leaving their homes. There's a Delta variant out there. Not everyone yet has been vaccinated. And so many of our events are hybrid or virtual, but we do have in person. And so we really tried to modify our events so that way folks could find ways to engage in the ways that they feel comfortable, right? We want to meet folks where they're at. So we've got our wonderful women's event, She Fest, which honors and celebrates our LGBTQ women's community that usually kicks off Pride Week and still does this year. That's happening on July 10th. And then on July 11th, we're not doing a parade this year. Parades are really, really expensive and take about a year to plan. There is so much that goes into planning a parade. So instead of a parade this year, we're doing a free speech march where we're calling for the rights and protection and the passage of the Equality Act. So we have full and equal protection under the law in the United States. So it'll be a march. And because our theme this year is resilient, instead of what we normally do with our parade, we start at the Pride flag and then we march into Balboa Park where we have that giant 55,000 person festival. We're going to meet in Balboa Park and we're going to march into Hillcrest to that Pride flag. And we're going to ask folks to go out and celebrate in our community and to support those bars, those restaurants that are LGBTQ owned, where LGBTQ employees, DJs, drag queens, musicians, and artists typically found employment throughout the year. And last year really didn't. So we want to see those folks really supported. The rest of the week, we've got things like our interfaith event. We've got my favorite, the Spirit of Stonewall Rally, which is Friday, the 16th of July. Hope to see you all there. That's where we honor our heroes and do a lot of call to action for the work that's still ahead. That Saturday, we're doing our Pride Live, which is the virtual content that we're producing. And then we have a series, a ton of events that are happening all over San Diego County. There's youth events, seniors events, teens events. There's events for service members. There's a Black Pride event, a Latinx Pride event, an API Pride event. There's a giant drag show. There's a huge block party in the heart of Hillcrest. So we've got like 30 plus events happening between today and July 24th, and most of them are that Saturday. Then on Sunday, we've got some family picnics in the park, just some much more chill, low-key events happening that Sunday, the 18th. And then I think I might take a nap the Monday after. You're not invited to that nap. That is an alone time nap.
and well-deserved and probably well overdue at that point in time. I love the concept of what you shared of marching from Balboa Park to the flag. Sounds powerful. So I look forward to either being able to participate in one of the events, and I appreciate what you're offering. Really quite a menu and an array of opportunities for us to participate. I wasn't good at taking notes of all those events. If we missed something, where would we find that information? I think we might have a link.
Yeah, so if you head to sdpride.org/pride, you'll see all the Pride events that we've got going on. And we keep reaching out to other community groups and small businesses to see how they're celebrating Pride. And we keep adding those to our event page because, this year is different. We're all in it together. And so if anyone knows of a community event that's happening and isn't yet listed on our website, just hit us up, send us that information. We'll make sure it gets posted on there. And we want to make sure everyone feels comfortable in celebrating that the way they want to this year.
Wonderful. I want to give you an opportunity. I know you had shared a little bit about don't ask, don't tell, excuse me, and this being the 10th anniversary.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so if you could share a little bit about the advocacy around that.
Sure. So, folks, I think, don't always recognize that San Diego has the highest concentration of military personnel in the entire world. And the other thing that goes missed sometimes is that the military actually has a higher concentration of LGBT individuals than the general population. And there's a really good reason for that. So as I shared earlier, I was a homeless youth. So many, 40% of all homeless youth are LGBT identified. Now, we know that we're not 40% of the population. I mean, that would be great. I would love that. Sounds like a fun time. We're not. So there's a disproportionate amount of folks who are LGBT and homeless because their parents throw them out in the street like garbage, similar to the experience that I had. So when you don't have a roof over your head or access to education or food in your belly, oftentimes military service is a way to go. So that is why there's so many more LGBTQ folks percentage wise in the military than the general civilian population, making San Diego really truly a hub for advocacy on behalf of LGBTQ service members and veterans. 10 years ago, we still had don't ask, don't tell in place. And for those who aren't familiar, don't ask, don't tell meant that it was don't ask, meaning they couldn't ask a service member if they were LGBT. Don't tell. So they were telling LGBT folks, don't tell them, but it was also don't pursue. And so it meant that you weren't actually able to engage in homosexual activity. And if they caught you, if they found out, then you could be kicked out of the military with a dishonorable discharge. Now, a lot of San Diegans really engaged in that advocacy work to repeal that. Our former Congresswoman, Susan Davis, was one of the people who spearheaded those efforts. 10 years ago, we were just before the repeal was enacted. And it was actually my very first phone call on my very first day here at San Diego Pride was a service member, an active duty service member who said, I want to march in the parade just like everybody else and be honored for who I am. And so we got to work with those active duty service members and veterans. And we, for the first time, had a contingent of folks from every single branch of the military march in a pride parade. And that was a first in the country. We worked for a year with those service members, veterans, and the Department of Defense to have the very next year, those service members were able to march in uniform. That parade has been a message of support because even after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, transgender service members weren't allowed to serve. But we at this Pride had out and proud active duty transgender service members marching at the front of that parade, risking their career for that visibility. And that is something that we were honored to be able to host those folks over the last decade. And we went so far as to build those relationships with the Department of Defense, support those transgender service members, and build relationships with the California Army National Guard. And then we got to 2019 become the first Pride anywhere to have a 4-jet flyover, which was pretty awesome. And the California Army National Guard actually did that publicly in support of active duty transgender service members and veterans. So that was really historic. And that's the sort of relationships that we're able to build and the messages that we're able to send from, I think what most folks think of as a parade and a party. And yet, we get to do so much more.
So it's phenomenal just to hear again the range and the scope and the impact that you have beyond San Diego as well as in San Diego. How are you funded, Fernando, and how can people that are watching today, as they become aware of San Diego Pride, support what you're doing?
I love that question. So, in a typical year, we're funded through those ticket sales and beverage sales and exhibitor sales that happen at the festival. The parade really, that doesn't bring in us any money. That's a free event. Happy to put that on, right? Like, that's great. But where we really do our fundraising is at that festival. It's 2 years without a festival. Wow. So what we've been able to do, thankfully, we built up our reserves for just such an occasion right before this all happened. It was part of our strategic plan. So we didn't have to fire staff. We didn't have to cut programs. We made the decision to operate at a financial loss in order to continue producing these programs for the last 2 years. So that said, we've really had to step up and do individual giving and donations. So we're so grateful to folks who have seen the programs that we produce, seen the value in that, and have made a contribution. So typically it's purchasing a ticket
Right.
or buying a beverage at the event, maybe a corporate sponsorship. But this year, it's really about the everyday individual person seeing what we do, finding value in that, and making a contribution.
Wonderful. Fernando, what about those that are moved in a particular way that they would like to volunteer and actively participate?
Absolutely. So if you want to volunteer, sdpride.org/volunteer, you'll see all the volunteer opportunities that are currently available. Now, as I said earlier, there's 200 folks who take a leadership position in the organization. If you're interested in volunteering in a leadership capacity, just hit us up, info@sdpride.org, send us an email, send me an email, and I'll connect you to our programs manager. And he'll tell you all the different open leadership positions, and we'll get you involved in one of the programs that is important to you in your heart.
That's wonderful. What I know we've come from one administration, we're into a new administration. What's on the horizon in terms of lobbying, activists, advocacy efforts, just so that we are conscious of that?
That's such a great question. Obviously under the previous administration, a lot of the work that we did was really challenging and slowly stripped away. We do a lot of international relations work, and under the previous administration, the support from the Department of State simply wasn't there. We're really excited that under this new administration that that support is coming back. We're actually have 2 new projects coming up with the Department of State and the San Diego Diplomacy Council in just the next few weeks. So that's one thing that we do that I'm really excited about is returning. We still don't have full protection in healthcare and access for LGBTQ veterans and service members. So there's a bill that we're supporting right now that was introduced by Mark Decano, and our Congresswoman here, Sarah Jacobs, has also taken up that mantle as well. So, we really want to support our LGBT service members and veterans. And the Equality Act is number 1. So for folks who aren't familiar, we still do not have full equal legal protection under the law. It's a tattered patchwork quilt of protections and rights and responsibilities that can change from city to county to state, wherever you go or travel or visit or vacation, or maybe have to even visit for work, making the experience of LGBTQ folks so challenging. So what we're really calling for is the passage of the Equality Act, which is an amendment to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that would protect us in employment, in housing, in credit, and public accommodation. So as some folks may have seen, all across the country, there have been laws that have been introduced or legislation that's introduced called FADA or RFRA, which means First Amendment Protection Act or Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And so what folks are trying to do is use their own interpretation of religion to give them a license to discriminate, which may be when you're talking about buying a cake and someone doesn't want to sell it to you, maybe seems really simple. But when you're talking about if my home is on fire and there's a rainbow flag outside, is that firefighter compelled to put out that fire? Is the nurse who is saving your life, if they notice the rainbow necklace that you're wearing and decides that that goes against their religious belief? It really is about a life or death matter of access to service and care, which is why we need to compel folks to pass the Equality Act. There's ways to get involved here locally, sdpride.org/Equality Act. We're part of the local and national coalition working to get that passed. So that is one of the most important things that we're working on right now. And the current administration is actively trying to make sure that that day is met.
Fernando, you are such a phenomenal spokesperson for San Diego Pride, and the work that's being done is wonderful. I appreciate what you're offering and value what you provide for our community and beyond. I wish you a tremendously successful Pride year, as well as the upcoming events. Anything that you want to leave us with in closing?
I'm truly appreciative of the time that you've given us today. And I want to say, I think sometimes creating change for anyone, especially a marginalized community, can seem big and scary and inaccessible, but really it's so accessible. Any person can make a difference in your daily life, with the organizations that you volunteer work for, with the companies that you're employed by, through your institutions of faith. Every single one of us has it within us to make some small yet meaningful change that over the long term, and with all of us working together, makes that lasting change. And so I hope to see all of you engage. And you obviously are here today if you're tuning into all of this. So thank you so much.
Fernando, thank you for offering yourself to us today. And I look forward to connecting with you moving forward. But thank you very much for your time. And again, have a wonderful day. And to all of you, thank you for being with us. And until we're together again, please be well. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jonathan. Happy Pride.
Thank you. Happy Pride.